그리워해 And I don't know why 넌 왜 또 스쳐가 괜찮은 줄 알았는데 Still on my mind 그리고 난 한동안 혼잣말로 Say I don't mind, don't mind 자꾸 반복해 아무렇지 않은 것처럼 담담하게 잘 지내왔어 널 데려가던 바람이 돌아올 때면 너의 흔적을 찾아 기억해 날 안아주던 널 이 공기가 느껴질 때면 시간이 아무리 흘러도 I want you babe, I need you babe 또 널 생각해 And I don't know why 넌 왜 또 스쳐가 괜찮은 줄 알았는데 Still on my mind 그리고 난 한동안 혼잣말로 Say I don't mind it, don't mind 자꾸 반복해 또 반복해 And I don't know why 넌 왜 또 스쳐가 괜찮은 줄 알았는데 Still on my mind 그리고 난 한동안 혼잣말로 Say I don't mind, don't mind Oh yeah, yeah, yeah Oh, I just don't know why 왜 또 넌 스쳐 I don't know why you still on my mind 괜찮은 줄 알았었는데 Oh, I just don't know why 또 네가 떠올라 Say I don't mind, don't mind 널 기억해
Good evening. Welcome back to my ongoing fight with printers, in which printers turn out to be even more horrible in this game than they are in the real world. Well, I mean, they're horrible in this game not because of what they're like once they're actually running, but of how to design the bloody things.
Someone just bought a thing from you. I'm going to print a label out shortly.
Right, that's nice. It's been working fairly recently. It might be okay. So I currently have two bad designs for this printer. This was the one I was working on Friday, which, like, is close to working. But mostly has problems with how we deal with the fact that the carriage has to be able to go from left to right and from right to left.
What a disgrace.
Yes, to be fair, as Pinkbees, they do indeed spend less time thick crinkle spoiting paper in this world, in part because this one is printing neural lattices and not anything on paper.
Well, if you thick crinkle and spoil that, who knows what will happen?
Yes.
Let's just say it's probably even worse.
Oh, we can save a bit of space here.
Not possible. What do you need to move
There we go. So that now means that column is available if we need it. Yes, so the problem here is not that the not what the printers do, but rather how we make the things actually do what we want with insufficient resources. I mean, that I think is part of why printers, namely that they are,
Just managed to within an inch of the terrible ones.
yes, at least on the like thinking side. I think also there's a bit of like anyone who's any good doesn't go into printers. Like, printers were last sexy in about 1985.
Derek may have a problem if you're trying to have sex with your people. It's very badly wrong.
Shh. Right.
What platforms have no sense of fun?
I was just looking at videos of tractor feeds.
Anyway, so yes, my the position I had reached was something like we have this thing which can correctly convert template numbers into the correct sequence of things to print, and this thing which can mostly deserialize them out of the RAM and feed them into this thing which then decodes the individual digits into this thing which prints them, and we have this arrangement up here that handles moving the carriage around, and all of that stuff works at least in isolation. The problem is that it doesn't necessarily work if you actually want to connect anything, if you actually put it together, and in particular it doesn't handle reversing these things when the carriage is going from right to left. And I still don't really have a good idea of how to deal with that, because we have the two problems. One, we want to reverse the digits within each number, and the other, we actually want to reverse the two numbers. And like, we have obvious ways to reverse the two numbers, involving using the fact that MC6000s have two registers, except that that won't actually work because the two registers are needed up here for decoding, because we need to be able to save dat and repeatedly reuse it, and if we don't save it and repeatedly reuse it, then we have to read it multiple times from the RAM, which is particularly unpleasant. So yes, what can I do to handle? So, like, and the digit reversing turns out not to be that painful, in that I have this little processor here that basically will wait for a number on X3 and return it reversed. Okay, it only works for certain numbers, but it works for all of the numbers we care about. Because almost all of the numbers we care about are palindromic. So there are actually only 3 numbers that it needs to be able to reverse that aren't palindromic, and possibly we could do even better. Maybe not, actually. Wondering if we could do some silly buggers with digit get and digit set, but almost certainly not in a processor that small. So the question is, how can we squeeze what we want out of what we have left? Do we redesign things a bit? So, as I recall, let me change that to X2 simply so that I can wire it up. Not so that I'm not actually going to use it for anything, but so that we can run the simulation, work out what mess we're in. So, currently the only thing that's actually fully functional is the head movement. But on the other hand, I mean, other things are working. We've correctly filled the RAM with the sequence of things we want to print. No, it's 6 2s followed by 6 1s followed by, well, those ones are probably going to be even in the right direction. 3 1 1 3 1 3 3 1 1 3 1 3. Yes. But then there's the awkward thing that it says 3 1 1 3 1 3, whereas actually it needs 3 1 1 1 1 3 3 1. Sorry. 3 1 3 1 1 3. Yes, 3 1 3 1 1 3, which we don't yet know how to reverse correctly. And then 2 2 2 2 2 2. 303 300 303 003. So all the correct data are in that RAM, which is quite nice. Rather perversely, that RAM gets rewound to so that rewinds it, but that's kind of slightly unnecessary if we work on the highly optimistic assumption that we can only print out one matrix per test run anyway. So, like, there's no actual benefit to being able to rewind this RAM because it'll only get written once. Like, if you're going to make your test runs only do one test, then you're going to have to power cycle the device before each print. That's just the way it is. So that would actually free up X3 there if we went, sod this, we don't actually have to be able to print more than one thing. So on the other hand, oh yes, and we could probably, yes, given the timings, this one at least knows when the first data have arrived in the RAM, which is quite useful, because it won't get to write its second byte out into this chip until this one has managed to write at least something to the RAM, and as long as something's been written to the RAM, the reading side can start, because it only has to be able to get the first byte out of the RAM before it starts sleeping. So that means that we could perfectly well have this chip signal to this one when it's ready, when it's safe to start reading from the RAM, and not bother. And we could therefore remove that track entirely, and hence that instruction. Take advantage of the bit of extra space we've got there to move that to the right. Move that RAM down a bit, I think. No, that's not going to work. Because I want to be able to use both of those X-bus ports, but I want to also be able to use that X-bus port. Um, it's obviously a silly design, but it'll work. Well, it won't, but because I can't now connect anything to that port there. Whereas if I move the RAM up one, then I can do that, which is fine, except that it doesn't give me any way to connect anything up to that data port. Okay, right, stupid approach. Yeah, right. So it prints something catastrophically wrong. I mean, to be fair, the first four things it prints are correct. Actually, I think I know why that is, yes. Because actually it prints the first two, skips one, prints the next two, skips one, prints the next two. Yes, very much so. So yes, because the problem is that we're missing that one critical sleep at the end of the program.
I suppose it's only skipping one of every three, but it's just picking crinkle.
And like we can totally cheat this for the first test run, but I'm not sure that. Well, let's cheat it for the first test run and see how much of the rest we can make work. What? Well, that was spectacularly wrong. Oh, because it needs to wait until... Yes, the problem is now...
Print your entire document sideways.
The thing is that this chip starts, as suggested, starts reading from the RAM far too early, and therefore prints a bunch of zeros initially. Because it read the data from the RAM before it was all written. And therefore it only prints the right hand half of the lattice. So that doesn't actually help. Because we do kind of need it to print, it's to wait for something to be in the RAM before it does anything. So that really means that this is kind of critical. That like this chip is the one that actually that really needs to be optimized. Yes, we have the slight problem of not being able to reverse things, but if this one can't extract the data correctly and print them at the right times, it doesn't really matter if we can't also get the right data in there. So one of my thoughts is that it does have a spare X-bus pin, and like if we can make a little bit of extra space, like if we can move this left one square, then we would have enough space to just drop an MC4000X in here. Yes, it would tread on that X-bus pin, but that's fine as long as it doesn't use it, and then it could connect through that one, and maybe act as a kind of coprocessor doing something or other, and thus free up some instructions in this one. So, I mean, of course, this processor is currently doing nothing at all. It's just acting as a convenient place to store some code. So maybe we should put that code instead in a post-it note. Because then we could dispose of that processor, and that gives us a bit of space. So, as what we did before, I thought was we put this ROM on the left. I can't now see how I could possibly have done that. Certainly can't see how it would be a good plan. I mean, we can put the RAM on the left, actually, and that would make things a little simpler, wouldn't it? Yes. And kind of weird, but functional. And that gives us quite a bit of space there. And in particular means we can shift that processor left by one and drop an additional MC4000X here to act as a God knows what coprocessor. We don't yet know what this coprocessor is going to be doing. I'm just hoping that I can shove a few instructions from this one into that one somehow. Like, maybe it'll turn out brilliantly and I could shove an awful lot of stuff into this one. Like, can this somehow be a DGT coprocessor or something?
I'm a cheap version of a God knows what coprocessor. I feel as if there are probably people I know at work who find concept amusing.
So... No, that doesn't work. Sorry, I was wondering if we could I was thinking, could we have a processor that does a different processor doing bit reversals, since this one's in the right place to go there. But we don't want bit reversals, we want digit reversals. So we can't have a duplicate version of this up here doing reversals, because that's at the wrong layer. We need something at this layer, or even slightly higher up. Anyway, tea. Oh, it's tea. It's all right. Yeah, it's quite warm actually. Just need to not spill it in the laptop. Right. So can we? Let's see. If we did a thing in here that somehow did like DGTX thingamy, and then wrote the output out to X thingamy. Is that helpful? I don't think it is, because I think that would then mean that this one was doing MOV thing to that processor, MOV DAT X3, MOV 2X3, MOV X3X2, which is solely useful, kind of interesting, solely useful in that it doesn't use the accumulator. So that would then mean we'd have the accumulator spare in this processor if we had some nefarious purpose for which we wanted to use the accumulator. For instance, we could have that be the thing that's doing the counting. So yeah, we could do that. I mean, it's not pretty, but it'll work. Well, let's first just program the boring open-coded version of that. Right, so we have a digit extraction coprocessor. Which gains us nothing at all, initially. Except that, so that should still do precisely the same wrong thing. But it means we're not using the accumulator in this processor anymore. Which then means that we could change that to MOV AC X3. Having done MOV 2 AC, and then sub 1 TQ AC 0 minus jump X, where X is there. And quite spectacularly, that breaks in precisely what? That has precisely the same flaw. Yes, that's right. That should be TCAC minus 1. Right. So that's still catastrophically wrong, but it's differently catastrophically wrong. Indeed, it appears that one of its catastrophic wrongnesses is that it confuses alpha and psi. Which I can now tell because this is getting so far that it's actually printing the whole of the first row correctly.
Sorry, did you just say it's reversed the digits?
It's reversed the bits. Yes.
Oh, yes, no,
It's a wrong layer of digit reversal, sadly. That was the thing I was wittering about before, that this processor is in the obvious place to allow you to do something that puts the bits in the opposite order, because it can also talk to this, to the I/O expander, and to the thing that's providing the digits, except that it's completely not the thing that I want to reverse. Happily, because I've written this so utterly crudely, and there's no cleverness at all in that processor, it's fairly easy to fix that bug. Yes. So now it has two remaining problems. Well, okay. Among its remaining problems are such diverse elements as two detectable remaining problems. One is that the asymmetric rows, the non-palindromic rows, get printed backwards incorrectly, and the other is that it starts printing again when it should have finished. So let's work out why on earth it keeps printing at the end. So right, so that thing is still reading from the RAM and doesn't know to stop, it looks like. And so it's only the fact that we've run into the zeros at the end of the RAM that means that we're not printing. And then it's only the fact that we're returning the print head that means that it won't print, because it refuses to print when there's nothing to print on top of. And then it finally gets to a position where printing is actually possible. And so it starts printing things again. So something needs to know that it should stop printing when it reaches the top, which it could do by keeping a counter. And indeed it would have to. I was wondering if we could just look for zeros in the RAM. But the thing is that zeros can perfectly well legitimately turn up if you're asked to print an 8 or a 7, each of which have a 0 byte in them. But you might, for instance, print 777 to stack up a big tower of A's, of alphas. So I mean, in theory, we could look at A0 with the RAM to see where we've got to. But, like, we don't have any spare X-bus ports on this device. So that's not very practical. It is now using its accumulator for something, so we can't comfortably use that for the counting. And that similarly makes trying to count 2 incoming zeros a bit tricky. It occurs to me maybe we can make this simpler by having this one do the counting for the digits. So this one just becomes a counter coprocessor. And maybe it could then tell this one to stop too. I wonder if it could. Might be rather complicated, but on the other hand, maybe that would actually make things better. Again, my desire for this to have the TIS 100 indirect jump operator comes back, because that's so brilliant for doing little microcoding things. And without it you can't do those cute microcode tricks. So, and what else we could do? That would be a stupid approach. I wonder if I can do it. Probably not. We haven't got any spare instructions. Like, because the carriage control processors have a pretty good knowledge. Oh, maybe we can. Of where of like how things are moving around, and maybe we could have them signal back to this one that it should stop printing. Like, say, if we had any spare code to do it, connect that up. When this one starts driving motor Y down, have it also signal There isn't quite a route we can get that signal through. Have it also signal back to this processor, please stop printing. Simple I/O ports are generally a bit difficult for this because they don't activate usually don't activate right at the start of the time unit. But the thing is, we've got a lot of time before spurious printing becomes a problem. Because while the carriage is actually still returning, it won't print anyway. So this could detect that, go, oh, I should stop printing. And as long as it stops printing before the carriage actually gets to the home position, everything's fine. But there's the slight problem, I haven't got any spare instructions in here to generate that signal with. So then the obvious alternative is that we connect directly to this signal. Which is tricky because there isn't a way through here. But if I move that left and that left and that left and that left, then there is a way through. We can easily connect to this signal, but that's the motor. Oh, that's the motor X. No, because we do need to keep printing through that becoming idle there and there and there and there. So we can't just say if the X motor isn't running, then don't print, because actually we do need to deal with printing while the Y motor is going upwards. It's only when the Y motor is going downwards that we need to stop printing. And unfortunately we can't, even though this one never uses P0, we're not allowed to do that, which is annoying. Well, that's the thing that it bans, is this chip connected. I think it's part connected to self. Part. As in, this device isn't allowed to talk to itself. It's not like it's going to. It never reads from P0. But okay, let's do the stupid thing then. No, that doesn't work. Now I can't get into that chip. I can't get round here by either route because, yeah, that doesn't work. Put them all back. Because either I can't get in or I can't get out, I think. Because this way I can do that, but then I can't escape up here because I get stuck connecting to that. But if this... No, why doesn't... That should work. Maybe I was just confused. Let's redo all of that and then work out why... Well, yes, let's not worry about the tracks for now, until we've proved that this does actually work. That can actually stay where it is. Yes, that does work. It's stupid, but... Alright, so now what do we do with this signal now that we've got it? We go... Oh yes, okay. right there. Yes, I could probably improve the layout a bit. I have gone for the very lazy approach here. So now, mostly this needs somewhere to go. Like that. Essentially, halt this processor when the carriage starts returning. Well, that was a spectacularly weird failure. What? What? Let's undo the only code change I've made. Not that I can believe it caused the problem. It did cause the problem. I don't understand. Oh, what?
What did we insert 999 on this?
Hmm?
Should we insert 999
No.
still printing?
Oh right, it's gone to sleep early, and as soon as it goes to sleep, it doesn't actually. Oh gods, yes, it's completely the wrong. No, what? No, because this can take zeros. Oh, but if it goes to sleep too early, maybe this one ends up printing things that aren't zeros indefinitely, but it should get jammed in that SLUX X2 then. Oh, but then it ends up printing whatever it last printed forever. Yes, okay, that's not unsurprising. So the problem is that
Not unsurprising.
somehow that fires. So let's actually go for the simple thing first. Stick a breakpoint on that SLUC 999 and see where it first fires. So at that point, P1 is 50, but it is only barely 50 in that one instruction earlier it got set to 50. So let's reset, clear that breakpoint and step up to there. So this is still generating the pulse to move the print head up there. And now, right, that test comes slightly too early in that it actually happens the same instruction as the motor gets turned back on again. We have a one instruction moment when the motor is temporarily set down, and we manage to sample that line in that one instruction when it's temporarily set to the wrong value. If I had dropped that instruction in anywhere else in the program, it would have been fine. So let's put it. Actually, let's put it there because that's less weird. So we'll put it a couple of instructions later. Right, that's fine. That's fixed that one. Right. At the expense of moving half the world one square to the left. Yes. I mean, I feel that we must be able to lay out this area less inefficiently, but... So now our only problem is that we would still quite like to be able to reverse digits for reversing for when the carriage is moving from right to left. And we don't yet have a way to do that. So this is the thing, this is the processor that fills the RAM. I mean, possibly, now that we've got two processors working on this bit, it might be possible to rework those in such a way that they can operate, they can do digit extraction in both directions. Because it occurred to me that we could swap, we could, rather than having this one do the digit extraction and this one do the counting, maybe we could have this one do the digit extraction and this one do the counting, and then this one could be able to count in both directions. But sadly these only have 9 instructions, and it would have to do the writing side would have to do all the sleeping because of the repeatedly found problem that in XBus you can't sleep waiting for a readable port. You can't sleep waiting for one of your own ports to become writable, i.e. for someone else's port to become readable, or no, to be read, which means that in general timing has to be done by the writer rather than by the reader, and I think, yes. So if this one were just generating digits, it would have to have all the sleeps as well, and loops of loops of small numbers of operations like counting to 3 are inconvenient to implement. So how can we do this? Like we have some code that if we had a spare processor we could stick into it to reverse digits, and like with a bit of shuffling we could probably even interpose that. Like, we could stick this RAM up here, stick the extra processor in here, and it would be on the route from this one to the RAM. But the problem is it can just reverse every incoming byte, which is not really helpful, because we want it to swap and reverse 2 bytes and then pass 2 through as they are, repeat. And that obviously requires slightly more processing power, though maybe not much more. So I now wonder if we could squeeze out enough space for an MC6000 there. Could we then have the said MC6000 do all of the reversals? And the thing is, it needs to do 2 forward. Maybe. So let's try to tidy things up so that we've got enough space. So I wonder if it'd be worth moving this processor all the way over up to here, because then that might give us enough space to move this one up a bit. So let's try a bit of shuffling. So that will still work. What do we want to do now? If I could see a way to squeeze that, that would be so nice. Just wondering if there's any of the work that I can do in this one, but probably not. Because like this does 1 cycle per row. And we would need it to have, I mean, it might be able to keep track of whether we're doing a left to right row or right to left row if that's convenient. Right, so what I would like is to be able to move this RAM up to somewhere around there. So its output obviously ends up there, but then we somehow have to get the signal to, maybe that can be done. There isn't actually much space there at the moment because of that fiddly little bit there. So yes, my problem is that if I drop this RAM in here, I then need to get a connection from X3 there, or something on this chip, to something on this chip, probably X1, without passing through that RAM, which is obviously impossible. Oop. Right. Yes, that is probably the right way to lay out these two. Now wondering if I can stick the RAM there somehow. Sadly, it's the bottom left pin we want to connect to, so I can't take advantage of that little notch up there. Which means it has to go here. And then obviously that track can't possibly take even slightly that route. I don't think this is going to work. No. Even if we ignore the fact that I then have to somehow connect this to that via a spare big processor. Which is like impossible in 3 different ways. So that one can obviously go up 1. No, that doesn't work. What I was actually hoping to do wants to shift the RAM over to the right and the ROM over to the left. Then
Impressively asymmetric sort of a planet. Very pretty.
inconveniently, I mean, I think this can be done in insofar as no, it can't, because I need to connect to that X1 without accidentally hitting A1, which I can't do by just doing that. That doesn't work. So that means that there actually needs to be some... no, that's fine. Swap those over. And then change all the registers. Ooh, that does have some interesting consequences. And this one needs to wait, get its input on X0, write RAM output to... Oh no, I'm an idiot. It does have to connect to both ports on the ROM. It doesn't have to connect to both ports on the RAM. And that then means that this has to connect to X3 on there, which means the RAM needs to move to the right again. And then that needs to somehow hop over that track. Except that can't work, so we have to swap these tracks over.
Right. Fork, remote. Ooh. That's so smooth. Smooth again. Alright. Good, right.
So now I can put all the numbers back. And then this one expects its input on X3 now. Sends its output to X2. So I think what I've managed to achieve here is I've changed the layout and not gained anything. I mean, the layout's more logical now, so maybe I can gain something with some more fiddling. And that one similarly has to wait for a signal from X0 and then read its data from X1. So that still has the failure mode we were hoping for, at least. It just doesn't succeed. And like the layout's more sane. We are kind of constrained by things like this can't go any further to the left because it needs these connections on its left hand side, and it feels like maybe it doesn't. Like, how crude can we be about this, do you think? Like, I am currently cheating horribly with some of the control signals anyway. So how would it be if actually the trigger to start printing, and indeed stop printing, was just this processor writing, well, whatever it liked, really? What I'm thinking is, what happens if I connect this to that, and then have this send, rather than writing anything to X0. Why can't I click on things? Have it write everything to X3, and like then just rely on the fact that they're both reading from X3 anyway. And that gets the timing adequate, at least for this job. And somewhat simplifies the wiring, and like that need not be X3, that could be X0 instead if it were more convenient. That would then, if I hadn't rearranged everything, allow me to tuck this processor one square closer into this wall, because it wouldn't be using X0 anymore. Sadly, some fool has gone and stuck this ROM in the way. Which limits my ability to move things around so much. But actually what I could then do is shift this processor all the way up to the top left corner by switching it to using X0 instead of X1. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And we're now reaching the point where we almost have space here. Not like very useful space. Of course, the place I really want space is to be able to interpose something in that signal there. But if we were able to shuffle things a bit. Can't really move these two up though because they crash into the data input. Like, we've got enough room to drop in an MC4000X here if we wanted to, and wire something to that pin. But the problem is I need 2 pins, and I really want to wire them, as previously mentioned, into that track there. And the thing is that unlike an MC4000X, you can't just drop RAM on top of existing tracks and then ignore them. You really need, because the RAM will not ignore them. Just staring at the board a bit and seeing if there are any ways that I can move things around to make things less tangled. Like having done that twice already, but I am gaining each time, I think. So, like, yeah, the problem I've got is that those 3 squares are useless as they are. We can't put a processor in them. As is all that space there. But we can't move this up and right because it would crash into that track. And we can't move this lot right at the moment because that ludicrously wiggly thing has to get through there somehow. I mean, this processor in theory could be on the other side of this one because it only needs 1 X-bus connection to it. Just wondering if, for instance, does swapping these 2 over make any difference? I think it doesn't. And indeed, I think it makes things worse. Because if this one is, if the actual output thing is up here, then it needs a second X-bus pin to actually be doing something. So the RAM could in theory move 1 square to the right, but that doesn't help us very much because that just opens up a 2x2 area there. So, like, at best that allows us to wire something into the address pin of the RAM, but we don't want to do that. I suppose it also, the thing that makes it just about worth doing is that in theory it then means that we can actually disconnect those 2 and interpose something, except we have no way to get the tracks in there to do that. Like, then how do we get this track and this track to actually connect to anything that might be able to do any operations with them? And yes, if the thing is that we can't really stop having this ROM and this processor next to one another because they have 2 X-bus tracks connecting them, and as soon as we start moving them, they'll need so much space for those X-buses. And now I don't want to move that away from that corner really, because it's getting some advantage from that, from being able to go into that slot there. And if I dropped an MC6000 there, say, just going, can I... Got some cells unused in the ROM, not enough. I was just wondering if we could actually have something that did the translation, did the reversals upstream of this rather than downstream of it, which would have the advantage that it would be a bit simpler, but it would need signals for thus generating numbers it could pass through to generate all of these in reverse. And the thing is, we've only got 2 unused cells in this ROM. So while we could say that like 9 generates you something reversed, that's nowhere near enough. And we certainly haven't got enough space for a whole spare ROM and something reading from it. Well, I say that, but if you imagine if we could get this down to MC4000X size somehow, then we could easily fit ROM MC4000X, ROM MC4000X, and it would only be a slight disaster. We would have a bit more space if we could shift this lot right by 1. Life would be a lot easier over here if I could get an upside down version of the MC4000. Like, could we just install this MC4000 upside down? Because then P1 would be here, and that would connect up nicely, and we could shift it right by a square. Probably there would be some other reason why that didn't work. Can't move this down, can we? Because fundamentally moving all those tracks down in that kind of space isn't feasible, is it? We'd go... And yeah, the problem is that I can't do that, so I have to do that. So if this were going to be moved down, it would have to be moved 2 squares to the left in order to accomplish that, just to get 1 square vertically, which is almost certainly not a good use of resources. going on here then. Just wondering if we can tidy up some of this code to give myself some space. So that one does has enough code for doing 2 rows worth of Y, presumably on the grounds that this thing generates 2 rows at a time because it has to go backwards and forwards. And therefore that one generates 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows, wait forever. I'm just idly wondering if we can have this only emit 1 row's worth of new lines and have this signal to it every line rather than every other line, and therefore get some spare instructions in this that it can use to write P0 when it's returning the carriage. But that means this one being able to write to X1 in this gap here somewhere. Where obviously it doesn't currently have any spare code. And it generates no, it has to have that conditional to make sure it doesn't do anything bad. Oh. No, that won't work. I was thinking we might be able to use a logic gate to do that conditional there, but my whole aim here is to get little enough code in out of this to get myself 1 extra square here, and having to add an entire 2x2 logic chip like that somewhere in order to gain 1 square of space is probably not wise. Staring at code more. So if this one were to do 1 line at a time, that would probably enlarge its code because it would have to have signals from here telling it which direction the line was going in. And that would then enlarge this one's code as well because it would be processing every line rather than every 2 lines, so I don't think that's sensible. So my immediate question is there some way that I can... So it occurs to me that these three lines here, MOV X naught AC, MOV AC X1, TGT AC 0, if this were, for instance, to write those numbers twice, could be boiled down to MOV X naught X1, TGT X naught 0, which would obviously be cheaper. Indeed, since this only does MOV 1 and -1, we know what those are. That doesn't help us a lot because it leaves us with the same number of instructions. Plus, we actually want the spare instructions here. Because, yes, what I just worked out was we could do... which works exactly the same as what we had before. And takes precisely the same number of instructions. And even if it didn't, would only be saving us space somewhere we don't care very much about. I mean, actually, saving us one instruction here would also be useful, because this one... Actually, no, that doesn't work. The thing is, all of these know when we've reached the end of printing. So any one of them can inform this one that the printing is done. This one conveniently... Some little changes here, they don't help. This one conveniently does it as a byproduct of everything else it's doing. Whereas, say, if it were to happen up here, we'd probably have to add an instruction. And, well, adding an instruction to this processor is obviously easy. The problem is that it's an MC4000X, and so it doesn't have a spare simple I/O pin that we can use for dodgy signalling. So if we wanted to do this, we'd have to replace it with an MC4000. That would require moving it one square to the left in order to get... because then it wouldn't have an X-bus pin there that we could connect straight across. On the other hand, that would, by a complicated sequence of events, allow us to move these two chips to the right, which I think is a net win. Oh. That doesn't work. Because I want to get one... Oh, actually, it does kind of work. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. But that really doesn't work in, like, the larger sense. I mean, let's prove that it works, and then we'll hit undo a lot. Okay, it doesn't work. What have I done wrong there? So, I mean, that works in the sense that it correctly signalled the end of printing, and it works in that we could now shift this processor 1 square, this processor 1 square to the right, and this processor 1 square to the right, but we filled all of our nice open space here. With tracks. So, like, there's no danger that we're going to be able to do our interposing a processor between this and this, because all the space that we might put it into is full of other processors. Yeah, I don't think that was actually, on balance, a win. So, yes. I mean, we've made some progress tonight. And looking at it, like, there's this great big gap there that's actually MC6000 sized. It's just that everywhere it has a pin, it would end up wiring up to something else, and none of the things it would wire up to are what I want it to wire up to. Because I really want to insert it there, but that light doesn't work for several reasons. I suppose technically even this one knows whether we're currently returning the carriage or not, so it could handle the signalling of that. That might even work. Maybe somewhere. Possibly not. I think we'd have to do it by a simple I/O connection again, and that's quite hard to wire up. Actually, now I'm wondering if maybe I was too hasty in dismissing the MC4000 there, if I could have looped. Now the problem was that I wanted to move this processor to the right and this one to the left, and that then, and connecting up to that pin would have taken me through the wrong places there. We're definitely progressing. Very close to working. Just not quite close enough. And like, I can't even fake it by changing the contents of the ROM to indicate where each row appears, which direction each row has to be printed in, because we have fours that have to be. 4 is one of the asymmetric patterns, and we have to print it twice. So it's kind of critical that that row and that row should come out identical and not as mirror images of one another. Which is a good thing to have included in the first test. Just kind of wondering what else there is here that might be able to do some of our timing work for us. It's like that sits in an SLX at the end, but and never uses DAT, so it could possibly even count the stuff it's reading in. Kind of makes me feel surely no. It's like it wouldn't need many instructions if I wanted this one to be able to like that would be what it would do in order to write the two words in reverse order. So if it had some way of selecting between them, it's almost got enough space to do the word reversal itself. If only it knew which approach it was meant to be taking. But fundamentally this one hasn't got enough space to signal which iteration we're on. Just for convenience we could even make that ACK. Let's just demonstrate this doing the wrong thing. So that prints obviously a rather different set of wrongness, but in particular it prints that one as I think the two words reversed, swapped over. I want to prove that that's correct, yes, because it's just swapped the last bit of each word. So, like, the word swapping is actually plausibly doable in this processor without needing to do it somewhere else. Though that doesn't give us enough space to do the digit swapping within the word in this processor, or even to signal that we want digit swapping within the word. Well, I've made some progress, so I think I'm going to call it a night here and say that's a night. And say that we still have to sort out correctly doing the right thing when the carriage is moving right to left. We have a bit of spare code here, and we've got some printed circuit board space, but it keeps not being enough. I'm kind of wondering whether there's anything that I can use it for nonetheless. But there's not. I can't really drop RAMs or ROMs in there anywhere. Like, if only I could arrange that this chip had its X-Bus ports up at the top, we'd have enough space here to stick a ROM in. Or a RAM. I mean, we might not be able to do much with it, but it could be there. But they aren't, so we can't. Well, let's leave it for another night, and one day I will successfully do this, but bloody printers. So, good night.